And welcome to the Crash the Pond podcast. It is a Tuesday, July 30th edition of the show, dead of the off season, but we've got a special episode for you guys today. Mitch Brown, this is your hat trick episode, third time on the show, officially in the Ring of Honor / jersey retirement, the director of North American Scouting for Elite Prospects. Mitch, welcome back. We're so happy to have you.
Actually, I'm really mad because you guys haven't had me on enough. I just like spending time with you so much that you just haven't offered. I mean, it has been so disappointing that I haven't get to spend more time with you two guys. And I just want to let you know that I'm bitter about this, and I will hold it against you forever.
Yeah.
Well, so this should go from being an annual thing to what? Is biannual the right term? Does that mean twice a year? I forget how it works.
We could make it twice. We could do a development camp episode. I know Mitch is a big fan of
Mitch
that.
could just be a permanent feature.
If you ever invite me on to talk about development camp, I will show up for the first minute, and then I'll just walk out and leave.
You know, I would respect that
maybe
so
I'll
much.
Pump some music in and not mute my mic, so then it's just over. It's just playing over you guys talking about Leo Carlsson can't skate at development camp or something.
Oh God, yeah. Well, I'll have you know, Lucas Pettersson showed flashes at development camp of offense. So
I would really hope that he showed flashes at development camp. I'd be a little concerted.
Well, according to your bio in the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, you are spending 12 hours a day tracking games from every major league in North America. So I don't think you have time for us, Mitch, and that's okay. This is the way we want it. We want your knowledge. We want all the insights. So it's all good. But we can make it biannual if time permits.
I have to seriously reevaluate my life, because the number of whatever you read, I was like, it's going to be gross hyperbole. And then you said 12, and I was like, yeah, that's a gross hyperbole. And then I'm like, wait a second, hang on.
It's a light day.
I don't want to share the number, but man, I got to make some changes.
Well, it's all good. We are all the better for it. So we're just going to jump right in. We have
not me. What are you talking about?
Well, we're gonna try. We're gonna try to get through it. We're gonna try to get through each player and see where this goes. I'm glad that Mitch is embracing the spirit of the off season. You've got the Hawaiian shirt on.
I love it.
Apparently, you're in the great outdoors today, which I think is a lot better than being in a hockey rink watching junior players at this time of year. Which apparently there are tournaments going on. So you're making the right choices. You're making the right choices.
We're
happy for you.
It's good for you.
I've heard. I've also heard getting sunburned is not good for you, but you know,
it depends on who you talk to. There's some people out there that say no sunscreen.
Tanning is some people tan after they burn, so I'm not one of them. But I
am just tomato. You know, I am permanently the palest person you've ever seen, and then it just gets more and more tomato like.
I do have to say I'm being called out. I can relate in our chat because you have one-upped me, by the way, with your Hawaiian shirt, because. Sometimes in the off season I like to rock them. Sometimes for big shows I do, and I feel bad that I don't have one on right now.
You guys could be matching right now. Jake dropped the ball.
I fumbled on the 1 yard line here.
There's always an issue with Jake. Every time I'm on the show, there's always something.
So for people who don't remember, which if you've blacked it out of your memory, I understand. The first time we had Mitch on, Jake's internet went out, and this was when Jake was moving into his lovely home, which I've been to. But the internet situation wasn't fully settled, and I didn't actually know the specifics of it until just before we started recording. But Jake was on the phone with Cox Internet trying to get his connection back up as we have a podcast going on. Like that's just peak. Yeah. That's just peak like podcasting. What could go wrong? Bingo card. That's the A1 option.
We powered through.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk about hockey. I promise. And let's just jump right into it. So Beckett Sennecke, the Ducks drafted him 3rd overall. And I'm just going to ask just your gut reaction, Mitch. How were you surprised by this pick at 3 specifically?
No, not at all. I mean, people have been talking about it for a month in advance, maybe even longer. I think it was kind of what you would expect for the Ducks to target. We were thinking Lindstrom, right? I know there was some talk about some defensemen, but Lindstrom, he fits what the Ducks generally value, but Sennecke is thinner, more underdeveloped. He's a late bloomer, and the Ducks tend to really emphasize like the lighter, thinner guys, more room for physical maturity and development, and hoping that leads to improvements in their game. And so Sennecke seemed like kind of a fit it was kind of like it was kind of a poorly kept secret entering the draft. And when it happened, it was like, okay, that makes sense. What happens now, and what is going to be the reaction to the Ducks taking Beckett Sennecke, who most people had outside of the top 10 at number 3? And I will say his reaction really summed up everyone else's reaction for the most part.
Yeah, it was. I mean, well, here, Jake, why don't you go next? We're gonna break it all down soon here, but we've got a list of questions we want to get through. So.
Yeah. And so with Beckett Sennecke, just to break it down, I know kind of Felix and I, throughout however many podcasts we've done since the draft, kind of given our opinion, but obviously we have you on here for a reason. What would you kind of say his ceiling and his floor is, just for if he were to become exactly what he could be at the high end of it, versus maybe he doesn't hit that, but he could at least be the floor level for the Ducks? What would you kind of put that at for this in terms of the level that he could hit?
Well, it's always a tricky question because I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I pretend that I have because I have to make a draft guide or whatever, but
You're not going to pull one out of the Hawaiian shirt for me?
Yeah. Industry secret. We don't know anything. But yes, the reality of it is that I think the question should be, what is Sennecke most likely to become? Mm-hmm. And for me, the interesting part of his game is that everything suggests a top 6 forward, but it's really the versatility. It's the number of different ways he can impact the game. He can be the play driver, the guy who carries the puck through the neutral zone, makes a ton of high skill passes, tricks everyone. But he can also be the player who plays off puck, more inside space, wiring one-timers off the pass, making that quick extra pass to the back door. He has the forechecking skill, and in a unique way too, like the way that he kind of hooks pucks off players' sticks and then slams them into the boards. Like, he's one of those players who everything he does, it always leads into the next action. He's always ready to move. Something very similar to Leo Carlsson for Ducks fans here. And I think when you're looking at a player like that, it's unclear exactly what he's going to be in the NHL, but you know that he's probably going to be quite good. So for me, he's a clear top 6 projection. How exactly that shakes down, not entirely sure. You can see the potential for him to be a true play driver in the NHL, a top line guy, someone who probably plays a little bit more off people than, say, like a superstar forward or whatever. But there's also the fallback game that he could be, say, the 5th or 6th best forward on a great team, where he's more of a forechecking off-puck guy who can create inside a little bit of space.
Yeah.
Do you
Felix, I got one thing I want to follow up with. Something that stuck out to me when I've watched this game, and I'm just curious if you could see this same thing, but trying to figure out a player that I think that he looks like, things like that, because I feel like he's so unique with his ability to almost squirm around players and get through players at different times. And I almost see a little bit of Corey Perry in that same motion with how he's able to get through players, get pucks off the boards, things like that. I'm curious if that's me just being crazy, or if you could see something similar with that. Not saying that that's who he's going to become, but similar elements there.
So, and I mean this in the nicest way possible. Sennecke is a janky player, and so is Corey Perry. You know what I mean? Where it's kind of like herky-jerky, awkward movements. It looks a little weird. The original one that we included in the draft guide was going to be Jason Spezza, who was also one of those very weird looking players who kind of did things at weird tempos and motions and turned in weird ways. And his hands would go one way and his feet would go the other, and everyone would be super confused. And it just kind of seems like he's getting by the skin of his teeth. I can't remember who we settled on, but yeah, I think those are a couple of really, really good ones for him. And of course, the thing with Sennecke, right, is that the player that you're going to see next year and the year after is going to be very different than draft year Sennecke, who was very clearly growing into his frame, still developing his coordination. He's going to pack on some serious weight, and I think he's going to look a lot more stable. And we're also probably going to see some stylistic changes to his game as a consequence. Probably the rushing game, the puck carrying, at least in the OHL, will become even more of a fixture, more of a feature. The unique part of that is how he uses his hip pocket. So the puck, instead of being in front of his body, he keeps it across his body, always hidden away from the opponent. But he doesn't really handle the puck much. When you look at top puck handlers, they handle it, they push it back and forth, they roll it out the back, whatever. They handle it a ton. He just kind of holds it in there. And so from there, he can do lots of cool things. He can pull it further behind his feet and then drop the puck behind him. He can keep it in that position, wait for a poke, and then quickly pull it back through underneath their stick. And I think as you see him get stronger and more stable, that element of his game is going to become even stronger.
Yeah. The Jason Spezza comparison and Corey Perry comparisons are really interesting because he does have that really kind of like gangly, awkward, just everything about him is just kind of awkward. And I mean that in the best way possible. How do you like the fit for him within the Ducks system? Because obviously, like you touched on it earlier, like there's a few different ways they could have gone here. Do you think that some of this pick is like, how does he fit into the system versus a Demidov or a Lindstrom?
No. I think they thought he was going to be the best guy and the best guy for what they're trying to do. You guys watch the Ducks. I know you watch the Ducks. You were Crash the Pond. And I would assume that if you guys didn't watch the Ducks, I wouldn't be here. They play creative hockey. They move a ton. There's a lot of interchangeability in positions and in roles and how players create offense. And he's kind of the perfect fit for that when you look at that in this draft class. Of the guys who were available, if you're looking for someone who could do the most amount of things at a high level, he was the best pick.
That's interesting because we've had so many debates with our friends in our Discord about, like Demidov, Lindstrom. And so to hear you say that is interesting because I think a lot of people would say Demidov is like the most creative or what have you. But there's other hangups with those players, and we don't have to spend a ton of time there. Do you buy the whole, I know you probably don't, but it's fun to hear you talk about it. Do you buy the reach narrative? Because literally as soon as this pick happened and everyone saw his reaction and I tweeted about it, the amount of replies that had the word reach in them, I can't even count them. So just your take on that.
Okay. So what I just said, right? He's the player in that spot who can do the most amount of things at a high level. Of course, there are other players who can do other more important things at a higher level, but they don't have the same breadth of skill as he does. So in that sense, you could look at Lindstrom, who's a better skater, bigger and more physical, and say, yeah, Lindstrom could develop into a better player with the higher end upside, but also develop the back end of the game that Sennecke has. Demidov could do the same because of the dynamism, and you hope that he could add the other things later. Berkeley Catton can add the physicality or whatever, but with Sennecke, you have it. And this is something that with scouting, it's really hard to say reach. People love to say, reach or a bad pick. Yeah. The reality of it is you're talking about 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
This is literally what I do for a living. There are a million perspectives where I can hear a million arguments that I can hear and be like, yeah, I can see how you can arrive at that conclusion. We've been having this debate internally with Carter Yakimchuk, who went 7th to Ottawa. I think we ranked him 17th.
Yeah, you did.
And the argument, okay. The argument that David and I made was that the reality of it is that if you believe in Yakimchuk's upside, which certainly he does have that top pair bomb from the point, activate, score goals upside, then it makes sense to pick him at 7. I know we ranked him 10 spots lower, but the perspective that the Senators had to pick him at that spot is very valid and easily justifiable as well. And I think with Sennecke's case, it's pretty much the same argument. Like, it's just so hard to know. It really is. And so when people are like, it's a reach, I don't know, man. I don't know. It could prove to be, it could not be, but
do you think that, everyone was saying this year, like, this is the year where you can truly justify like 9 different players starting from number 2. Do you think that's kind of almost true every year though, where like once you get outside the first overall pick, if there's a consensus that it is kind of a who's highest on your board, or do you think that maybe this was just a year where there wasn't really that hierarchy?
Certainly in this year, there were more of those guys where you can see the argument for it and it's justifiable. Like, obviously you can't be like Tarin Smith could have gone 3rd overall. Like you're not going to be able to convince anyone of that. But you could look at it, say Yakimchuk could have gone 3rd overall. You could look at it and there are guys who went like Sam Dickinson. There's a justifiable argument for him to go 3rd overall and so on. And so definitely that class is longer. I will say though that the interesting thing about prospects is they're getting better. And so with scouting, you're constantly trying to catch up to figure out, how are these guys developing? How are they adding so much more skill at this pace? When you go back and look at the OHL 8 years ago, I mean, there are 4th liners now who are making plays that 1st liners couldn't back then.
Wow.
the skill gap is gigantic. It's just like more skill development, more coaching, more emphasis on these players and forcing other players who are, more goon types out of the lineup. And so as we get more and more of that coming into every single league, I think more drafts are going to be like this.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, that's exciting though, for sure.
Yeah, I completely agreed. And I think with the reach, I think part of it is people get so set with public lists, and if something doesn't go towards it, I feel like people maybe buy too much into that a bit from time to time and don't think about kind of how different teams, and kind of like what you said with Beckett Sennecke, how looking at the tools and having that discussion instead of just looking at the number next to the name and sometimes. But as you mentioned on Sennecke, he was a late riser with how he performed at the end of the season, how he performed in the playoffs, and everything along those lines. Do you think that should be a knock on him? How much do you think that should play in someone's evaluation? Do you think that that's giving too much stock into him being a late riser? Teams shouldn't be putting as much stock, I guess, should be the better way to put it, into a player that's like that, or how do you view kind of that aspect of it?
So it's all context dependent. With most players, if they have a late surge, sometimes it's just luck. But with Sennecke, he was doing these things before the surge. As I'm sure you guys know, like you've watched him, and you also saw my tweets about it as well, where I'm tracking all these games and like he's posting the elite results before the big surge in scoring. And of course, with him, because Oshawa was a good team and kind of a weird conference, you got all those games late to kind of see where he was at and if that late season surge was correct. He scored at a 106-point pace in the final 28 games of the season, regular season and playoffs combined. So I think that's a large enough sample where you can extrapolate that over the course of the season and say, okay, he was rough at the beginning, but he still showed all these same skills. The frequency of those skills and plays increased as the season wore on. And then the production, which was lagging by a couple months, eventually picked up. And so it's in those situations where you kind of have everything already set before the explosion, before the percentages go in your favor, where you're starting to say, okay, this is for real. We can evaluate this in the same way we would evaluate anything else. And I'm just going to say, there were games in the playoffs in particular in that North Bay series. North Bay is a heavy, physical, and creative team where he looked like the third best player in this draft class, or the fourth, or the fifth, whoever you want to take it. But he looked like a prospect comparable to the Caden Lindstroms of the world in some of those games. And so how much you want to weigh those is really up to you. But I think those games are probably closer to the truth than the bad ones at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is that you hear a lot of scouts say that, well, if a guy, he kind of goes in that upward curve throughout the season, that's like a big deal, that's really important, or at least it boosts their evaluation. How much does that matter to you? And also, what if it's flipped and they start strong and they kind of go down, like maybe like an Anton Salayev, like as the season progresses, like, should it matter? Is it all just a wash, or how do you kind of view that?
Yeah, it definitely matters. I think it matters more for the players, though, from a mental perspective. So, like, I've recently started doing player development stuff. I've worked with some players in the Q, some players in the Dub. And when players get cold late in the season, they feel it more, man. Because that's when, like, the pressure is on. You're trying to make the playoffs, or you're trying to get ready for the playoffs. And then you go cold, and then that stays in your head a little bit more than it would in December. And then you go into the offseason with that lack of momentum, with that in the back of your head. You're like, okay, why did this happen? And most of the time, it's nothing that you did. Like, you didn't do anything, but the players are constantly thinking about, they don't think about the context or the environment around them. They don't blame other people. They're thinking, I was a point a game, and then I went and I scored 1 point in my final 10 games of the season. What the hell was I thinking? What happened to me? And so from like a player standpoint, you always want to finish strong because it's easier to take that into the off season and into the next season. And plus, everyone has super short memories in hockey. Your coach can be like, "Oh man, he finished strong. He was playing great defense. He was on the penalty kill. He was dangling people. All right, we're gonna put him on the top line to start, and it's his spot to lose." Whereas if you started there and you finished poorly, then you might have to work your way back up the lineup. So How do you square that in a draft perspective? I would say it purely comes down to the context again, like what we discussed with Sennecke. So in Sennecke's case, you have the larger sample. In Salayev's case, I think it's just the uniqueness of the toolkit. I mean, being 6'7" and skating like that, like it doesn't. I mean, this guy could have done nothing the entire season. He couldn't have. If he didn't have the first half, he still would have gone where he did, right? Just because of the tools that you don't see that very often. It's definitely better to be a late riser than to be a faller. And I would say that history generally shows that to be true as well. But what you're looking for more is not necessarily the guys who like the value that you can add with guys who fall is guys who fall from their draft -1 to their D year. Think of like the Brandon Saws of the world where they just kind of stay the same player, or the Ryan O'Reillys where they just kind of stay the same player in their draft -1 and draft year. And then people overthink it, and that's how you get them. So
yeah, or the like Cole Eiserman situation where, you know, it's like he's number 2 on every board a year ago, and then I forget where he went, like 20s or 18s, something like that. So yeah,
I don't remember fully, but on Beckett Sennecke though, because got a couple more here for you on him, and then we'll move on, I swear, to other prospects and get a little bit deeper here. But for him, assuming he goes back and is not on the Ducks next season, what do you think is the biggest area of improvement for him? What do you want to see from him kind of going into next season and to really add to his game?
Honestly, I just want to see him move a little bit better. I think he's a naturally explosive player. I think the mechanics, the awkwardness, how his feet flail and how his movements, he tends to get ejected from his turns and whatnot, tends to really limit that side of his game. So what I want to see him do is play with a little bit more pace, attack with a little bit more speed. He already does the great things about getting to the middle, changing speed, cutting back, and so on, all the projectable rush pattern stuff. But I want to see him really take that next step from a physical side and then impose his will on the game. And then, of course, if you're looking at a player to go to the NHL, particularly to go to the Anaheim Ducks, you want to start seeing him mugging people, right? Like, that's just the reality of it is you want to see him shaking people down in the corners and whatnot.
Get on Paverbek's good side.
That's what Paverbek wants. Yeah. This is now just like a fun hypothetical question, but if you had been in that chair at number 3, would you have gone in the same direction or different direction? How would you have kind of seen that pick?
Read the Elite Prospects 2024 NHL Draft Guide. I would have picked Ivan Demidov, even though I didn't watch a single second of his tape last year because it's not my job. But he was our number 2 guy, so we would have picked him there.
Okay, so you're going by the board. Love it.
Tone the company line. I respect it.
Well, the reality of it is that it's a board. I got to push it. I'm part of a team. You know, I go in here and I start talking about it. Yeah, you know, I don't want to be that guy who's like, you know, sharing other people's opinions as my own or whatever.
Yeah, well, how do you guys do that? Because I'm sure all you guys have different boards going into like your meetings, and I'm sure those boards are hidden away somewhere. Like I'm sure there's a David St. Louis board hidden in a file somewhere. So do you guys? I mean, it seems like a lot of compromise has to happen, basically.
Yeah, the David one I put in a radiation-proof room. Everyone else is fine, but David's is locked away. Yeah, so everyone has boards, right? We have crossover people, we have regional people, and then they give me a range for where they want the player if you're regional. But it doesn't really matter much because you can all just estimate where that is based on, you know, how the board is looking and so on. But so they give me a range. I do some math stuff, do some averaging to figure out exactly how things are going to fit. And then the board gets weighted by, you know, how much work people are doing and also their role in the company. So like game reports and stuff like that are very crucial to the process. The more game reports you file, the more we're willing to concede ground. Like, but really what I'm trying to do, what my job is, obviously it's to know everyone in North America. But really my job is to get players on the board. And then if someone has a player that they like that maybe I don't like, to get them in a spot that makes them happy because they've done the work. So rewarding people for work rather than necessarily having my own opinion all the time. And so that's kind of a delicate process. The way we set it up is that everyone gives me a board. It goes into a spreadsheet, and then all the boards get produced into one giant list that is, you know, it shows me, you know, who's ranking them where, and it gives me a final end result. And that's kind of the starting point where we tinker that from. So it's a pretty interesting process, actually. It's very hard to manage because we have like 14 people, maybe 15 people involved in it. And so there are a lot of diverging opinions, but a lot of them tend to get averaged out because we talk all the time. Everyone's constantly communicating. And so people will have an extreme opinion, but it'll align with other things. So it's much easier to manage it, right? Like they might have one player of 5 who is way higher, but we all have those other 4 players in a relatively similar range. And so it's not as argumentative as you might think.
Okay. There hasn't been one debate that's like, challenged friendships or professional relationships.
Okay. There are definitely some. There have definitely been some extreme ones, but like it's all in good fun. Like, we have a really good aura of like friendly competitiveness, I'd say, where like, everyone's pushing each other, everyone wants to learn more, and definitely everyone wants to get their guys on the board a little bit higher. There have been some big ones for sure. There are always like 3 or 4 every year that are sticking points throughout the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Are they typically higher in the draft or lower in the draft?
There have been some lower in the draft. I'm not gonna lie. There was one. I think it might have been.
He's a 4th rounder
in like the 70s or something. That was like kind of a sticking point for a while. It's usually the early second though, where things get really messy.
Yeah.
Like that's when we really start arguing because it's like we're trying to weigh percentages. Like there are guys who, there's a 5% chance that they play, but if they play, holy crap, they're going to be good. But then there are also guys who they're probably going to play, but they're probably going to be bottom of the lineup guys. And so you're trying to manage all that. And you always have your preferences with those types of players too. Like you might like a Tarin Smith, but not like a Cole Hudson. You might like, a Nathan Villeneuve, but not an Ethan Procyszyn or so on. Right. And so you're always trying to manage all of this and all these different opinions. And then when you're working on a board public with so many people, you're also trying to like tell the story of the draft and trying to consider like how the reader is going to view it. So like when you're not just trying to have the most extreme board, like obviously we do have some absolutely insane opinions, but we're trying to have a board that like shows the story of the draft and shows what it would look like if you were to combine as many perspectives as possible, I suppose.
Yeah, it is fun to look back on the older ones, like from a few years ago, like 2020, for example. Well, probably not for you, but
no.
But it is interesting to see how it ends up shaking out. Okay, well let's get into some of these players though. It's funny hearing you talk about like, the guy who has a 5% chance of playing, but if he plays, he'll be great, and vice versa. It's like, well, the vice versa sounds like who the Ducks like to draft nowadays in those middle rounds. Maxim Masse was a guy who some people had way higher in the draft, and the Ducks got him a little later. I mean, the rap on him seems to be that he's maybe not the greatest skater, but he's got this kind of all-around game. How much do you think he can develop offensively? Like, how much upside is there here, I guess?
This was such a Ducks pick. When that name went up on the board, I just started laughing.
Of course.
I was like, yeah, we knew it.
Yeah. They love
it was the same
guys.
thing with Tarin Smith. When they took Tarin Smith, it was like, yeah, I knew that was coming. The Ducks always do this. But yeah, so Masse is very interesting. He's pretty specialized in what he does. So his game is get open in front of the net, tip pucks in, bank them off the goalie, quick hands and tight, roof them, whatever, some outside shooting, but it's more in that element. And so when you're projecting in that element, you're thinking, not does he have good hand-eye coordination? You're thinking, how does he control the exchanges of contact around the net? And that's what Masse is really good at. He scores goals by like kind of pushing a guy and then spinning off him and then whacking in the rebound. He scores goals by leaning into someone and then pushing off into space for the deflection. So he has a lot of that little physical, subtle detail to his game that's going to allow him to create space in the NHL. Certainly not a fancy player. He can set chances up from down low. He can make the open pass off the rush. He can see the occasional like cross ice play or whatever, but nothing too fancy. He's again a projection on a guy who's big, hoping that he can become more physically mature, and that will open up more of a puck handling game to him that will fit with what the Ducks play currently in the NHL.
He's got a pretty good shot. Do you think that's going to be a weapon for him in the NHL, or it's just kind of like junior hockey? There's just more space. How do you see his shot?
Distance shooting is always secondary. It's always a secondary skill when you're projecting it to the NHL. I would say certainly like he'll score from distance. I don't know if he's going to be a 30 goal guy, but like a 20-20 guy, and he scores most of them around the net. Maybe he can give you a little bit of defense, a little bit of playmaking, and he'll have some flashes of like imposing his will physically on players, not necessarily finishing his hits, but like, getting in the way, making his presence known, annoying people, so on, like having a little bit of a pest side to his game as well. I think we're thinking more of maybe mid 6, probably bottom 6, but definitely, again, like the Ducks like to bank on this archetype, and I don't blame them for it. So I thought it was a good pick. Thought it was a clever one. I think it fits with what the Ducks are trying to be. And I also think he has a real probability of having a breakout season finally, because he was the Q Rookie of the Year 2 years ago and didn't really build on that. But I think with Chicoutimi getting better, he's probably going to score a bunch of goals, and we're probably going to see a little bit more diversity in his game.
How close do you think he is to the NHL? Is it like a year of junior and then maybe back and forth, or how do you see that?
So 2 more in junior, probably 1 or 2 in the A before we're looking at him in an NHL context.
Okay.
I think he's going to be more of a longer term guy.
Okay.
Those types of players in that archetype are usually, you have to develop physically, but then your game is so dependent on timing and awareness of space, since you don't really have the skills to create it yourself. The margins for you are so much smaller, so it takes a while to get adapted to the pro game.
Okay.
I can't wait for him to score 50 goals next year and to make the Ducks out of camp.
Yeah. So I'm going to be honest about all these later round picks. With this draft and how the top of it was and trying to figure out who the Ducks were going to take, I threw my hands up after the top 10, and my whole process was looking at who the Ducks took and then basically jumping into the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, reading your guys' website,
process.
Other stuff. The process of figuring out who these players were, but kind of having gone through all that and looking at everyone that the Ducks took after the first round, the name that really stuck out to me, and largely just due to how your draft guide propped him up and talked about him and everything like that, was Tarin Smith. And you've mentioned him, and he just feels like a really exciting player, and it feels like the draft guide was higher than a lot of other public lists. And so kind of, what did you see in Tarin Smith that made him this guy that kind of you thought, first off, like you said, he was such a Ducks player, Ducks pick, and what made you guys think that he should be so much higher than other spots?
So I did not consider anyone else's ranking and then making it my own ranking. I don't even look at other rankings.
I know, and that's why I always appreciate it.
I will say, though, that with Tarin, certainly a lot of the feedback that you hear from the NHL side is not super positive. Like, people like him and they like his game. It's just a matter of figuring out what he is in the NHL. And to that extent, I can see it. However, we mentioned the 5% thing. There's a 5% chance that he plays, but if he plays, he's going to be really good. That's Tarin. He has that type of dynamic skill from the point. It's a little awkward, but he has all the moves. The thing that makes him particularly interesting is that he's not just doing a move and then like, oh, it worked, it didn't work, it doesn't matter. He's doing moves based off of what the defense is doing. He sees the feet of the defender, where they're pointed at and so on, and he makes sure to really sell that he's going in one way to get them to move, to pull them in towards him, to create space to go in the other direction. And so while you're not expecting him to beat guys off the point every game like he does in junior, if you want a good example of what he does, there's a Moose Jaw Warriors game. It's the March 1st game maybe, where it's like an 8-7 game, and he's just cooking Moose Jaw from the point like crazy. And you really see that what he's doing isn't necessarily making the big moves to get off the point, but he's making moves to get to the middle of the ice, from the boards to the top to the middle of the zone, because what he's trying to do is get everyone to converge on him, and then he's just going to rip a puck back. Or if they don't, he's just going to throw it on net for a rebound, a tip, a deflection, whatever. So in that sense, there are some really translatable elements to his game. Obviously, ton of style. He's a very stylish player. Yeah. He's very unique in how he looks. I've tweeted out a couple of videos of him over maybe the last year, and you can see it. Like, players don't usually move like him. The way that he holds the puck, the way that he loads his weight onto it, the way that he fakes, it's all distinct. You look at that and you like, that's Tarin Smith. You can see it from anywhere. His first WHL goal before he had that knee injury that caused him to miss most of that season was, that's Tarin Smith. It's just style. And so how much does that really matter? I don't know. But I also think that the fact that you don't see players who look like him gives defenders a bit of a weird look. it's harder for them to kind of figure out, what is this guy doing? The question is, can he do it on the breakout? If you want to be an offensive guy in the NHL, you got to make plays on the breakout, and he does not make enough of them. Some of it is because he's not used to the WHL pressure yet, and I think late in the season he showed some growth. I think he showed a lot of growth defensively too, but when I said about NHL people not seeing a role for him, this is what it comes from, right? You need breakouts if you're going to play offense. And the defense isn't at a high enough level that he's going to be a defensive guy. So what is it? But he does have that, he was basically a WHL rookie this year after losing his draft -1 season. He is more physically mature than other players. He has a lot of great individual elements. So you're hoping that he'll put all those together. And let's be honest here, a very favorable Everett Silvertips environment. They love their defensemen. They love activation. They have a great team, and they'll have a great team for years to come with Landon DuPont. And so I think this is a really smart bet on someone who the chances are slim, but if they hit, you're looking at a top 4 guy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jake.
And I just think that kind of exactly what you're saying is, I think, why I find him so exciting, because I feel like if he does end up making, he's just going to be a joy to watch. I mean, I think it's similar to what we're starting to see from an Olin Zellweger in some ways. Different player, different everything like that, but similar, of very unique and just really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, watching him skate and reading the industry chatter in your in the guide, that's I mean, it feels like that's where this entire thing, will be decided. Maybe that's an overstatement, but what do you think is the limiting factor in his skating? Like, where does it need to get better? And what, I mean, how easy is it to get that much better at skating? And I know that's like a broad brush, but how do you see all that?
Yeah, so I don't have any inside information on like his camp or how he skates or anything like that. But I think for me, it's the lack of depth that hurts him. He's very inside edge focused as a skater. Like in his stride, he doesn't access his outside edge. Not a big deal. But when you go to do turns, when you go to evade pressure, you want to hit that outside edge punch turn rather than using the heel to heel to shift around pressure. It's sharper. It's more aggressive. Re-acceleration is so much easier when you have your weight stacked like that. And he's not great at that. The other thing too, a little bit more physically mature, so you're hoping the skating will improve. He's a very smart skater. When he knows when to hit the gas, he knows when to do a move, he knows when to fake. He has some quick feet in some circumstances. The defensive skating in particular improved a lot, cutting down on crossovers, widening his base, focusing more on C cuts and heel pushes and so on. But I think this is very much going to be physical development, off ice stuff. That would be my guess. And there's a chance he doesn't do it. There's, with all these guys who can't skate to a degree, it's sometimes it just never comes. And then other times they make it without it. And then other times they just get so good within the framework of how they skate, their natural base, that it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah. And for people who might not fully grasp what Mitch is saying with like the outside edges, just watch Olin Zellweger skate, because his ability to turn on a dime on the outside edge of his skate blade is just, I mean, it's a sight to behold. Like I'm gonna do the pet peeve, but there were clips of him from development camp last year of the skating drills, and we see it in games too. It's not just when there's nobody else in the ice. Except,
only development camp,
except
only
coaches. Camp. But that ability to just get deep into that turn, it's so fun to watch. And yeah, with Smith, it just feels like he's got a little ways to go before we see that. Well, Jake took Tarin Smith, so
sorry,
I get the honors of bringing up Ethan Procyszyn, and I'm going to admit my bias here. Of course, barely watched him, but is there any like offensive upside here? Like, what are we buying into here with Ethan Procyszyn? Because he just kind of looks like a fourth liner to me, but I could be completely wrong about that.
Well, I mean, a fourth liner is a hell of a pick at 68th overall.
That's true. Yes, that is a good counterpoint.
So what the skill is that he's absolutely insane.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the skill.
He's out there hurting people.
If it moves, he makes sure that it's no longer moving when he leaves the ice. Like, there's a level of like emphaticness to his physicality that really stands out, right? Like guys will go in there, I'm going to hit that guy, or I'm going to win this battle. With him, it's like, I'm going to win this battle, and then I'm going to pick you up, and I'm going to throw you to the ice, and then I'm
Destroy
going to go to the net. And he's very annoying. Like you see it in the tape too, where he's like just in people's faces all the time. He's just like kind of getting in their way. He's very disruptive in that sense. Now, the puck skills. So North Bay plays a very east-west focused game. It's a lot of lateral movement, passing across the ice. Their breakout is literally get the puck to the wall and then bomb it to the other side of the rink so the winger can pick it up and gain the zone. He's really good at those plays. Of course, he's the center, though. So you don't get to see that as often. Particularly, he's playing a checking line role. He's North Bay's 3C. He's going to be their 2C next year with Liam Arnsby going to pro. So I think you're going to see more skill from him. His skill is all reactive skill. No doubt about that. He's not like really manipulating defenders. It's more he gets a puck inside space. He recognizes a vulnerability. He maybe does a quick fake, pushes around them, shoots, takes the puck to the net hard, stuff more like that. I think realistically, it's a 4C projection, but the fact that he has that crazy physical element and he can make skilled plays in open ice. Like in the NHL for a fourth line center, you do need to have some level of dynamism off the rush because you need to get the puck to the offensive zone. You need to be able to beat other fourth liners, and everyone in the NHL can make plays for the most part. So he will have to develop a little bit more skill, but yeah, that's the key is, it's a fourth line center projection, but this is someone who you look at and you see he could be a long-term NHL player and bring unique value in that role.
Okay. So it kind of sounds like this might not be, I mean, this definitely isn't apples to apples, but like a Ryan Lomberg, almost like just an annoying player that can maybe make a play.
Right? So NHL teams don't like him.
Yeah.
True.
People are asking in our chat, and just maybe we didn't make it clear enough, but Mitch doesn't cover the European prospects as much, and so we're just not going to ask you to say things that you don't really have the basis that you'd like to have. So people are confused why we talked
about 400 North American players. Zero Europeans unless they're in North America.
And then the last guy I want to ask you about was Alex Blais. So he's kind of an interesting player because it feels like there's not, I mean, again, this is just my own, very limited view here, but like there's not necessarily like an elite trait, but it seems like, and even this is reflected in your grades where he's just a little bit above average and almost across the board. How do you project his game?
He was a really tough guy to figure out this season because you watch him and you're like, this is objectively good. And then you're trying to figure out how does this work in the NHL? And generally that doesn't work in the NHL. But the interesting part about it is that he has a ton of pace. So right there, he has a big advantage over other players in that archetype. For the most part, they usually tend to play a little bit slower. They tend to like the defense to come to them. He's an attacker. He wants to take the puck to the middle, get you to poke at him, and then he's going to go around you. He wants to go wide and then take the middle on you and so on. Like he has all these little tricks to be able to attack the defense, to create seams and coverage and open up lanes. The way that he scores is more in like sort of the medium danger ways. So like a quick pass off the wall for a one-timer, a shot off the rush, the occasional get to the middle and shoot. He doesn't really score in like the high danger ways, right? That you normally see with high scoring prospects where it's like when you look at their assists or their shot assists, it's just all cross slot passes or passes to the front of their net or whatever. Blais doesn't really do that. He's more focused on like play building. So like attack middle, draw defense, drop it back, shift, so on. So he will be an interesting one to figure out, especially over the next couple of years, because I would anticipate we're going to see him becoming more of that that high value creator in the queue. And then right after this year, he's eligible to go to the A, where if he translate that, if he does that successfully and brings that next level offense to the A, then you're looking at someone who can make it as a smaller player who maybe isn't the most athletically gifted, because he has those play building skills. He's someone who can play off his teammates, but also build for them. I wouldn't bank on him becoming an NHLer, but I think it's a pretty good bet probably picked him around 100. So I think it's a pretty reasonable bet. You get the upside there. He's a kid who works hard, has added so much to his game over the last few years. So yeah, it's a bit of a long shot, but if he does hit, you're looking at probably a mid-6, maybe third line winger who can do some unique things for your team.
Do you think
Look at you just saying probably around 100 when he was drafted exactly at 100.
I knew he was a 4th rounder, so so that's how my brain works. 4th rounder, 100.
Exactly 100th. Sorry, Felix.
So for you, like the thing that's gonna maybe hold him back is it's like a combination of the size and athleticism. Is that kind of what it sounds like?
Yeah, it's just the lack of a real standout element, right? Like we can talk about play building and shifting defensive gaps. NHL teams are like, does he hit? Can he win a face-off? Can he get the puck to the middle of the rink? Can he play defense? And so with Blais, you're hoping maybe he adds those things and makes it, but more likely his route is going to be doubling down on what he's already good at, adding some of the extra things in the process, but becoming more of a supercharged offensive player who can overcome, below average size, below or maybe average-ish tools to slightly above average-ish tools. You really just want to see a guy like that develop a standout tool rather than a standout play or standout style of play, right? Like if you're a 5'10" player, and I'm not saying this is right, but you need to have that special thing. And he doesn't quite have that yet, but he's close and it could go in many different directions.
It feels like the Ducks have taken these kind of swings before, like Antoine Morin in the past. I don't know how well their games align, but it's like smaller player who doesn't necessarily do anything at an elite level, but has a chance to play. I think Morin was a 2nd round pick though, maybe 3rd round.
I think 2nd.
I think he was a 2nd rounder. So maybe this is just a more comfortable spot to get a guy like that. Should we talk about drafted prospects? Or do we want to talk about Austin Burnevik, who I know literally nothing about?
I've got nothing.
What's the elevator pitch on Austin Burnevik?
Yeah, so Austin Burnevik, big guy, skilled passer, really skilled passer. Some of the best passes you'll see in the USHL were off his stick. He's a bit awkward, bit of a slow mover, doesn't really have much development, like in terms of skills. You're not going to see many good sharp turns from him or quick evasive maneuvers, but he has a very good understanding of how to lead his teammates into space with the puck, hitting area passes, bank passes and whatnot, and then getting open and scoring goals off the catch. So again, in true Ducks fashion, you're hoping that more physical maturity leads to improved skating, which leads to an added layer of skill that he can then translate to the NHL. The thing with him is that he doesn't really have much defensive ability or physical ability. Like he's a big guy, but he can't create space for himself at all along the wall. Little guys just push him up and, he's completely immobilized because he doesn't really have the skating base to be able to get low and absorb contact. So a long-term project, but someone who projects as both an above-average shooter and passer, which is a rare combo.
Okay. That's exciting.
Yeah. So moving on to drafted prospects. The first player that we kind of want to hit is Cutter Gauthier. And so, 9 months later, with some hindsight, what are your thoughts on the Drysdale for Gauthier trade?
Yeah, so I'll tell you my thoughts at the time. Wow, that's all they got for Cutter Gauthier. And now my thoughts on it are, wow, that's all they got for Cutter Gauthier. I think the reality of it is when you buy low or when you sell low on a player, even if it works out, the process was good and that's repeatable over, you're going to win on more of those than you lose. And I don't think the Ducks are going to lose on this one. And it's not even necessarily that Cutter Gauthier is going to be a top line player or whatever. It's going to be that Cutter Gauthier is a great fit for what the Ducks want to be. And he has the versatility to elevate the Ducks to another level as soon as next season. Not to say that he's going to make them a killer in the playoffs or anything, but his attention to detail. Yeah, sorry. I'll send you the definition for that after this.
Don't know what that is anymore.
with Cutter, it's all in the details, right? You're not. He makes. We'll talk about some of the poor decision making, but with Cutter, it's that win face off, move puck quickly, get open, start passing plays, cut back off the rush, use the trailer, make that little end board stop, the great stick in the defensive zone. I know the motor doesn't always run super hot, but his stick is on every puck when he's going. He's deflecting every pass. He's getting his stick in shooting lanes. And when you look at him at the World Juniors, when he's playing that very more focused details game where he's specifically trying to open up space for his line mates with every action that he's doing, that Cutter Gauthier is a top six forward, could be a center, could be a winger, but it's all details. That's the core of the projection. Now, The frustrating stuff is that Cutter Gauthier, his favorite offensive play is skate to the far boards at the blue line and then shoot, and then it goes all the way around the boards and back out of the offensive side. He loves the Jack Eichel special, and so with him, you're really thinking like, is this a product of the fact that he has scored too many goals from here in recent years, and you need to tell him that, hey, you realize some of those were just luck and you can knock it off? Are they a product of coaching? Or are they an inability to create space for yourself, and so you're just panic shooting? It's definitely not the last one. When he's not looking to just rip everything, he can beat defenders in the high-level ways, fake them, move them around, pass through them. He can make those long-range lead passes through the defense. He can go cross-ice. He can cut to the middle for shots. He's not the most dynamic puck handler or individually skilled player, but I think his calculus as an offensive player, just like so many others before him, is going to change significantly in the NHL.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts there, but one thing I wanted to kind of pick at here a little bit is, how do you look back on the Jamie Drysdale experience? Like the fact that the Ducks drafted him at 6, there were other guys, of course, and then never gets off the ground in Anaheim.
Or other guy saying as if it's like a failed relationship. Well, I guess it is.
I was, personally, I was dead set on other players at that pick at the time. But
Felix is scarred.
Do you think there's still hope for Jamie Drysdale? I guess is the basic question I want to ask here.
I said it the first time that I was on, I think. Is there a reason to have hope? Like, it all depends on how you viewed his OHL career. And it was so long ago.
Yeah.
I was so much younger. The world was a different place when he was in the OHL. And so, the problem here, to boil it down to a single thing, is he doesn't have a standout dimension. He has a standout tool, skating, but offense, no. Transition, no. Defense, no. What does he do at a top 4 level in the NHL other than simply move around the ice? Nothing. And so when you pick a guy like that in junior, you're like, hey, he has all these tools. He's going to stay in junior. He's going to develop in so many different ways, and we can guide him and shape him into the player that we want him to become. Look at Simone Nemetz in New Jersey, where he was kind of just a mover, and then they developed him into someone who's a really good puck retriever and activator. So someone who can get a puck and then join the play, get a puck up the ice, and make some plays every now and then. Drysdale just doesn't have the dimension. He doesn't have that thing that you really hold on to as a coach. And at his age, 22 years old, because I'm on Elite Prospects right now. EP is great. Highly recommend.
Check him out.
He's 22 years old, and he had 10 points in 34 games this year. The underlying results were not great. And when you actually watch him, he's not impacting the game in any meaningful capacity, really. So there's not really there isn't really any reason to be optimistic about him right now, unless he comes into camp and is just a new player, which, at this age, it could very well be. But for the most part, when you're 22 and you've been in the NHL for this long, this is who you are.
Yeah, this is now all retroactive because he's no longer in the Ducks, but I do feel like he's one of those guys who really got hurt by the shutdown of the OHL, like having to play in the AHL and then the NHL so early, and doesn't mean that he would have turned out any different, but it's like, we'll never know because he never really got the fair shake, I guess. And he just wasn't healthy this year.
I also think he's been let down in some ways by the way he's been talked up by different people within different organizations. You look at when he went
to the Ducks organization,
both the Ducks and the Flyers.
Well, John Tortorella compared him to who when they first got him? Was it like Nicholas Lidstrom or something? It was like some elite.
Wasn't it Erik Karlsson?
Yes, it was Eric. Yeah. John Tortorella talked about Jamie Drysdale in the same vein as Erik Karlsson when they first got him. And it's like, John, how many minutes of him have you watched? Because it doesn't take many minutes to figure out that those two players are not alike at all. But
maybe the first thing he saw was like Drysdale cutting back behind his net, like Erik Karlsson does. Yeah, that's Erik.
Yeah. So we'll table that one. But I think I'd like to see Drysdale succeed because I feel bad, honestly. But coming back to Cutter Gauthier, though, how much stock do you put into the season he just had at Boston College? Because he had a terrific year. But watching some of those games, like you just talked about, it didn't really feel like he was doing a ton. And then you look at the score sheet after the game and he's got 3 goals. And it's like, well, I guess he did quite a bit. Then there were other games, the bigger games, where it felt like he was actually really engaged and making plays for others and coming back on the defensive zone and moving his feet in the defensive zone. What's your takeaway from the season he just had? Like, is there, how much can we really take away from it, I guess?
He had a very weird season. Just as you said, it's like when in the big moments, Cutter Gauthier is amazing. That's NHL Cutter Gauthier. That's what you need from every game. But then, like you said, he'll have a game where he scores 2 goals or whatever. And one of those goals is a pass to the slot that deflects off someone. And the other one is a bank shot off the goalie from behind the net. And it's like, those are the only 2 plays that he made. And they're not really plays that he made, if you know what I mean. It's very challenging to figure him out because the better the competition, the better he looks. But you need him, in the NHL, you need your guys to be good on Tuesdays in December. And does Cutter Gauthier have that next thing? I personally think he does because I've seen him at lower levels when he's going 100% on these games all the time. But certainly he's more selective in when he chooses to really go. I also think Cutter is someone who is very, based on what I've heard about him and when I've heard him speak, he's very focused on doing something in a game. This is the game where I'm really going to try and focus on the details. This is the game where I'm going to score goals and so on. He's someone who's very goal oriented, and so maybe that translates into these ones where the Tuesdays in December or whatever, he's not looking too good because he's focusing on something else in the game.
Do you think it's effort, or is it just the way that he plays, that it's this anticipation game, or is it just a combination of the two?
It's a combination. It's always a combination, right? We often like to say just if this guy had this next level, just to be tried hard. And it's all these guys try really hard. It's just some guys do try harder, but it's also some guys, their try is dependent on seeing what is available to them and what they can do. And sometimes it feels like Cutter doesn't fully have especially the defensive side of the game. If he can see a stop, he's going to get it. He's going to sprint there. He's going to make that play. But if he doesn't see it, he'll kind of drift off and lose his man and slip away, and he doesn't always have that recovery gear.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jake, you want to take this fun one here?
Yeah. So for him, we talked about this with Beckett Sennecke, so I'll adjust it to kind of how you put it, because this was going to be a same ceiling floor. But what do you think the realistic expectation is for Cutter Gauthier in the NHL as he develops further and further and plays more and more?
Secondary top 6 guy, someone who's not going to drive play, but play off his teammates. We talked about how Sennecke could be that, or he could be a driver. With Cutter, I think it's pretty firmly into the guy who's a supporting player. But I mean, there are so many supporting players in the NHL who are so valuable.
Yeah.
You add someone like him who has positional value. He can play power play. He can probably play the penalty kill too. So going to have lots of asset value and be a big part of this team.
And it seems like at the end of the season, the Ducks were dead set on having him, well, I guess for the one game that he played, but dead set on having him with Leo Carlsson. So it kind of seems like that would be a good fit based upon what you're saying also, right?
It's a great fit for a couple of reasons. The primary reason is that when Gauthier is in the offensive zone, he's moving and he's engaging people. And so when you're Leo Carlsson, that's lanes that are opening up for you. And it's Leo Carlsson. I mean, he doesn't need a lane to make a play, but now he has a guy who's constantly making little cracks for him to operate, and the offensive production goes way up when you have someone like that.
Yeah. I'm very intrigued to see what it'll look like, but I think there's potential there. Okay, this is a guy who, I'm going to be honest, didn't even really bother to watch any bit of him this year, but the hype around this player is just out of control. And I don't know what to do with it. I don't know if it's real. So you need to explain to us, Yegor Sidorov, what is the deal? 50 goal scorer. What is happening with this player? Because I swear to God, every game this season, it felt like he was scoring a goal. People are really excited about this guy in the Ducks fan base, and I have just no clue. I have no clue about this guy at all.
Remember how we just talked about Cutter Gauthier scoring nothing goals? Every single one of this guy's goals is the craziest goal you've seen. Every single one. Every single one is ridiculous. They're all like between the leg shots, or like pushing between his legs through the defenseman and then coming around and going to the net. Like, they're all the craziest goals you've ever seen in your life. Like, this guy is a human highlight reel. It's insane what he does. Like, I watched a lot of just like Yegor Sidorov highlights. I've mentioned this somewhere else, but like, the thing that I would do on Monday morning, go on instat.com, Yegor Sidorov, see what he did. Go through his scoring chances and his shot assists just to see, like, what was this guy up to? Because it's always just the craziest stuff. And I think what's really fascinating about him too is that he's always had some really good elements to his game. Likes to delay off the rush. He's somebody who's really good at inverting pressure. So he sees a defender in front of him. He's really good at getting them on his back where he's in control and they're following him around the ice. That was kind of his separating skill in his original draft year and in the draft, and then the draft season that he was picked by the Anaheim Ducks. And then you start really seeing him morph into, okay, now they're reacting to me. I'm just going to do whatever I want. And then the creativity starts really shining through, and he's just experimenting, pushing the limits of his game. And it really helps that he's been playing with the same center for 3 years now, and Trevor Wong. So they have that built-in chemistry. Like, he knows where he's going to be at all times. So there's this real level of freedom that he's able to play with that basically no one else in junior ever gets to really have, right? He's someone who mastered a specific situation with a long-term line mate in an environment that allows him to do those things. Now, is it entirely translatable? Of course not. But he's someone who meaningfully expanded his game, added more skill, the shot, NHL caliber. He's a smart enough player to play in the NHL. The handling skill is absolutely NHL caliber. So what you're really hoping for is just a little bit of extra physicality to his game, but it really comes down to what does he do in the A. No one has any idea what he's going to look like in the A. No one.
I'm so excited. I think he's playing. He's in the AHL this season, I think.
Yeah, he'll be in the AHL.
He's going to be worth the AHL TV subscription fee on his own. Because
it will be incredible. Whatever happens, it will be incredible.
I may make the trek down to San Diego to watch a game or two then.
But like, is he? I guess it's impossible to know, like, for this upcoming season. But is he a guy who, like, in the defensive zone, how's it looking there without the puck?
Tries hard. Reads are not developed.
Okay.
So you're really banking on that effort turning into a better understanding of where to be and how to engage opponents and so on. He takes a lot of stick infractions. He's I wouldn't say he's undisciplined, but he's definitely one of those players who I think really is learning how to use his body and how to engage opponents in like projectable, sustainable ways. So he's a project. Like, again, shooting, puck handling, vision, feel for the game. Those are elements that would land you in a top 9 in the NHL. But he has to develop the rest of his game significantly to get there.
And how's the skating? How's the moving for him?
It's hit or miss. Like, it really depends on like what you're evaluating. Like, if you're evaluating it from like purely economy of movement, no, it's not good. If you're looking at it from like the output, yeah, you could probably see that working at an NHL level, especially given how he plays the game, right? Very much focused on like manipulating defenders, creating gaps, creating openings, and so on. So I think it's probably good enough, but of course, getting stronger is going to help him. But realistically, it's probably just get him to the AHL, see if his skating is good enough to be able to make plays here.
Okay. I am so excited. I have no clue how this is going to go.
And another kind of player that I think is in not that same vein as a scorer, but I think another one of have no idea how it's going to go long term is Rodwin Dionicio, where if I'm remembering correctly, his draft season, he was playing forward with Shane Wright at different points in time, and now his transition back to playing defense is making the move over to Europe. I mean, what do you make of him as a player, how his season's gone, and what do you think of the decision to go over to Europe to play over there next season?
Man, I love when people ask me about Rodwin Dionicio. It's great.
That's what I'm here for.
So we ranked him in his original draft year, 21-22. He played D that entire year, but he in 22-23 when the Ducks picked him late in the year, Windsor moved him up to play with Shane Wright. because Dionicio played forward growing up. They probably played like maybe 7-8 games together.
Mm-hmm.
Dionicio was the better player. I'm not joking.
I remember seeing that from you somewhere.
The Shane Wright stock just plummeting.
I was so curious that I was like, okay, I'm just going to watch these games. I'm going to track the data and see who's outperforming who. And statistically, Dionicio was generating more scoring chances than Shane Wright was in those games. And the unique part of his game is that he's a playmaker like a forward, but just in a defenseman. Like he's someone who doesn't really want to go D to D. He wants to get off the point and rip a cross slot pass. He wants to take the middle and then go backdoor. He's always looking for the ultra high value play to such an extreme level that I've never seen before. I've never seen a player that looks like Rodwin Dionicio. I've never seen a player who does the things that Rodwin Dionicio does. He's honestly a marvel in this sport. Like, he is someone who, if this guy makes the NHL, positions don't matter anymore. They're not real. How defensemen create a whole new world opens if Rodwin Dionicio is a sick NHLer. Because now suddenly it's like, okay, we have a guy who can barely skate, but he's Roman Josi.
Yeah. Do you think the European, I think it's the Swiss league. Do you think that's going to help him? Or because I'm assuming it's a little slower than the OHL. How's that going to play for him?
I would say 99% of the time, it's a terrible call. For him, it's the right call. This is someone who the issues with him are inside space. The movement is a big problem. He's a very stiff mover. When you're looking at great skaters, right, their lower body and their upper body are very separate. Like when they stop, for example, they don't stop like this. They stop like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like they collapse their weight over top. It allows you to accelerate faster and really push off your legs and get moving. And he doesn't have that. He's very stiff. He can't really do those tight turns or not very agile. And that translates to his defensive game, where his defensive game is very much guy has puck, I skate right at him, hope I can poke it away, and if not, they're going to score. Like that's how Switzerland lost that semifinals game against Sweden, right? Was he skates straight at a guy who just is like, okay, I'm just going to go left, and then they walk straight in and score a goal. Or I think he took a penalty because of it, and then they score on the power play or whatever. But it's like that's how he defends, and you can't do that, and you can't do that in Europe especially. In the OHL, you can do it because guys are like, man, this 6'2" dude is skating at me. I'm just going to get rid of this thing. I don't want to die. And whereas in Switzerland, if you do that, they're just going to skate completely around you. The ice is wider. Teams tend to be more passive in their tactics. So you're going to have a lot more room to operate. So for him in particular, it's a really good call because he's going to have to learn more projectable skating elements to be able to, have success there. And then if he does that, like, there won't be another player like him in the NHL. But I think what he showed at the World Juniors and in the playoffs in the OHL this year really suggested that this is a guy who could play despite the oddities in his game, despite the fact that he moves weird, despite the fact he doesn't generate offense like most defensemen do. And he's a great worker. He's someone who's really improved his game. He tries really hard. He cares a lot. He's very smart. He's a really smart player as well. So I think it's a big long shot, but if this guy hits, you're looking at something unlike you've ever seen before, even if it's just as a number 4 or number 5.
I'm here for it. I want to see it.
I want to make it happen somehow, some way.
Let's move away from prospects here somewhat and just look at big picture. So we had you on the show a little over a year ago, and you were definitely beating the drum of Adam Fantilli at number 2. And we were all excited about Adam Fantilli. I mean, he's still an exciting prospect, but when the Ducks drafted Leo Carlsson, all hell broke loose in the Ducks Twitter sphere. Like, people were so upset. How could you pass on Adam Fantilli? And Mitch, I'm not saying that you contributed to this expectation, but I'm not saying you didn't either.
I can only work with what you guys ask me.
I'm not saying you're an accomplice.
It would be so rude with me if half an hour into your show, I was like, guys, you need to stop. It's my show now, and we're going to talk about Leo Carlsson. No.
You were a Leo guy all along, is what you're saying.
No, I was a Leo Carlsson as a first overall caliber talent.
Yeah.
I like Fantilli more, sure. Good. But if you pick Leo Carlsson at second when he's a first overall caliber talent, does it really matter that much? I don't know.
But all that context, all that important context, all 100% true context considered here, how do you feel about those two guys now? I mean, just kind of comparing their games and their trajectories. I mean, totally different environments. And, I think that Fantilli really had a rough go of it in Columbus. But how do you see that debate now with some hindsight here?
Well, I think probably the better player at this stage is Carlsson. I think the more exciting player in the NHL is Carlsson. I think year one, it has to go to Carlsson. Year two, year three, year four, I don't really know. I would guess that Carlsson is probably going to continue to expand the gap over the next year or two, depending on what Columbus does in terms of tactics, depending on what Columbus does in terms of giving him line mates to work with and what they tell him to do. With Fantilli, the appeal is that he has all these different elements to his game and all these other ways to play. And sometimes when you have a coach who wants you to play in a certain way, you're going to really tap into the running around trucking people element of your game and kind of lose it on the other things, right? And with Carlsson, you can't really do that. What are you going to do? Tell Leo Carlsson that you need to go around hitting people? Like, it's not what he does. Yeah. That's not his game. His game is, I'm huge. I got a ton of finesse. I'm going to spin off every single check that is thrown at me, and I'm going to make a ton of plays to the middle. It might not work every single time, but I'm going to create some chaos. I think what this season showed in particular was that Leo Carlsson has a better understanding of how to create meaningful offense in the NHL, particularly with regards to how to create chaos in the NHL and then navigate that chaos. He's much better at playing the read, react, anticipate, react game than Adam Fantilli is. He's much better at still having his creativity when things are unclear what to do, whereas Adam Fantilli tends to be, okay, I guess I got to shoot it. So year one definitely goes to Carlsson. I think there's a chance that Fantilli closes, but the situation that the Ducks have built seems to be better for Carlsson than the situation the Blue Jackets have built for Fantilli at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's not it's an interesting conversation to have, but at the end of the day, it's not really fair to either guy. Mm-hmm. It's just fun to think about, but people were so mad at us when the Leo, and they were mad at us for some reason. It's I didn't draft the guy. I'm not what, I have nothing to do with this. But I think what people didn't understand, at least, just your average Ducks fan, is that the gap between those two guys wasn't this enormous gap. I think that
there was no gap.
Right. But people saw Fantilli always at number 2, always mocked to Anaheim. And that creates the expectation of, he is the second best prospect in the class, when really it's one guy has to be 2, one guy has to be 3. And a lot of people had him at 2 instead of 3. Now it seems like there really is no gap. And maybe there's actually a gap in the other direction with Leo Carlsson being better. But
yeah. And I think, speaking of Carlsson, kind of you look at the Ducks forward group, it's just so stacked with high-end talent that they've drafted high over the last however many years. But we kind of talked about the second rounders, the late first, whether it's Nathan Gauthier, Nico Majadovic, Colson Petrie. The Ducks have a bit of a type. Do you think that that's as a response to the amount of talent they've amassed for the forward group that will be top 6 players, and they're trying to find guys to fill out the bottom 6, or those are just the guys that are simply highest on their board at those positions?
Definitely the latter. You look at their draft history, and this is who they always like. They like these types of guys who are very engaged. They try hard. They have details, and then they hope that they can add more offense to what they're doing. At a little bit of a smaller level, this was Mason McTavish, where you're picking him because he has the physicality, the ability to play inside contact, the details to the game, and you're hoping that the motor will pick up and that he'll become more of a playmaker. And then surely enough, both of those happen, right? And I think this is with Colson Petrie, it's the same thing. You're making that bet with Miatovic, you're making that same bet. I think those are the types of guys that they value. And I think the Ducks have shown that they maybe necessarily don't have the most prototypically great drafting strategy, but they are the best team at using their strategy to draft, right? They are the team who when they pick a guy in their archetype, they pick the most skilled one.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated to see how like this long list of players will pan out, because some of them are going to, I would imagine.
You'd hope.
Talking about someone else who we've talked about before with you, but Pavel Mintyukov was in the NHL last season and was very good in the NHL last season. Were you surprised at all at how quickly he made that happen? And, you know, is there maybe a lesson here about these guys in junior who are displaying these kind of unbelievable traits that maybe they can jump quicker, or is this just a Pavel Mintyukov story and that's the end of it?
Well, part of what made Mintyukov a perfect fit is that he brought something that Anaheim didn't have, right? Like, okay, Anaheim wants to do all these like activation plays and like movement and stuff like that. And then now you have a guy whose defining skill is that he's in every single play, particularly his ability to like create off the wall in the offensive zone, right? What a lot of guys will do, they'll get a puck, they'll move in, and then they'll throw it back into the corner. Mintyukov in like the preseason had decided, no. That is stupid. I'm going to get the puck, go down the wall, and then pass it back into the slot. And he just kept doing that all season long. Because for him, right, you know, this is how he manages risk. Why would I throw the puck into a battle into the corner when I can pass it into the middle for a scoring chance? In isolation, it might seem like passing to the middle is riskier, but he knows that he can complete that play, so it's less risky for him than it would be for like Radko Gudas, who actually makes a shocking amount of plays these days. Yeah. Anyway, Anaheim Ducks, man. Ilya Lyubushkin was nuts with the Anaheim Ducks in some of those games I watched.
I thought he looked okay at times, but that was not a popular opinion, which is fine.
Like, this is a guy who had no skill inside the offensive zone at all in previous years, and then with the Anaheim Ducks, it's like, I'm actually going to try to make plays sometimes.
Well, he played with Mintyukov. They were tethered to each other.
Yeah,
so
they had some good chemistry. They
had
some good inversion plays where both of them went in at the same time and were trying to hit each other.
I really was so blown away by Mintyukov.
Yeah.
Just the fact that I didn't even think he was going to be in the NHL last season. So the fact that he made it and had an impact is just, I don't know. I have no idea what next season is going to look like. So it's just been a fun experience. Some last questions here, because we're getting up on time. Okay. This is a simple one for you. Once a player gets drafted, I've heard people say this who are in the draft world, in the draft space, who I won't name because I don't want to, bash people, but I've heard a person say, I'm not even say people, I've heard a person say that once a player is drafted, they basically close their eyes on their junior career until they're either in the AHL or the NHL. That the rest between that time of getting drafted to being in pro hockey just doesn't matter anymore. Where are you at on that? I'm guessing you don't agree. For those who can't see,
for those listening to the audio version of this, Mitch just gave us a glare,
a little bit of a side eye. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to use Ducks examples to heap on this. So, Olen Zellweger, when he gets picked out of the WHL, he played 11 games. I'm just going to be completely blind to what happened to the rest of his WHL career. I'm going to ignore the fact that he was like maybe the best WHL defenseman of the last 5 years in his last season. I'm going to ignore the fact that he measurably improved every single element of his game. With Mintyukov, I'm going to ignore the fact that he went from being this unorthodox player who generated offense in weird ways and ways that you don't see in the NHL to someone who suddenly realized that, hey, I can do all my plays in Ottawa, but in a more streamlined NHL way. And having that information made it much easier to project Pavel Mintyukov to a top pair role in the future, and certainly expedited his transition to the professional end to the NHL game. So my personal opinion on this is I think that's insane. I think that you're just finding ways to cut corners. And if you want to cut corners, by all means, but let's just be honest about why. Let's just say that you don't want to watch these guys. If you're trying to come up with reasoning for it, just be truthful. Don't say that okay. So my personal opinion is that I think that European players make the NHL at a lower rate, and therefore I'm not going to watch them. That's why I'm the director of North American scouting, not the director of European scouting or all continent scouting.
Yeah. I think that I understand the sentiment of, hey, the production after the draft year is something you don't want to weight incredibly highly. But yeah, to close your eyes at what a player's doing in their development arc is a little crazy.
Imagine if you just like stopped living your life for 2 years and then like woke up like, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep doing everything that I was doing. I'm going to ignore everything that's gone on around me. Yeah,
draft plus one, draft plus two doesn't exist. I guess. Well, this is a good segue then. Draft pet peeves. So takes or beliefs or just things that come up, especially around draft season. Like, what are some of your pet peeves? Because there's quite a few to choose from, but I'm curious if you have any.
Yeah, so my number one thing is actually no, I don't have a number one thing at all. I was hoping that my brain would just like naturally go and be like, yes, you hate this thing, dig into it, go. No, I don't really have a number one thing. Truthfully, like I don't have many prospect things that bother me because like my mentality to this is I'm just the dude who gives you the information. Whatever you choose to do with it is your own problem, right? Like it definitely like when people willfully misinterpret something like that I wrote in a draft guide or an article, it's like, oh yeah, that's an interesting curiosity, but it's like I'm not responsible for how people interpret my things. Obviously I can control it to a degree by not sucking at writing, but as a professional writer that seems like a really monumental task that I don't want to have to work on. So I think the one thing that gets me, I will say, other than the development camp stuff, other than the saying that it's a reach or a bad pick or whatever, is that when people look back on scouting and instead of like lambasting me for something that I said that was stupid and wrong, they're like, oh, Mitch said that this guy couldn't shoot the puck, as they show a highlight of a dude who was scoring his 8th goal in his 100th career NHL game. Like, okay.
Yeah. Those are the best.
But it's just, I think people who aren't in it sometimes, and I know this is 100% a me problem, like someone who's presenting the information right, and it's a communication issue. They think that if you are saying that something is average, they think it is bad, and that's not good. But to be NHL average in something is insanely impressive.
It's actually elite
in the NHL.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like even in the NHL, to be average is a really, really big deal, right?
Yep.
And so people would be like, oh, this player, so and so said that they couldn't skate or whatever. I was told this guy couldn't skate, and then they'll like get a breakaway or something. So it's like, yeah, because the difference in NHL top speeds is negligible. Connor McDavid's top speed versus like the 50th percentile guy's top speed is very small. The difference is in their ability to accelerate, decelerate, how they're able to change direction sharply and reaccelerate and so on. And so a lot of it comes down to like, how do I communicate that information effectively? Which again, as a career writer, I'm thematically opposed to working on myself and therefore must blame everyone else.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and you touched on it, is the idea of the consensus, because it's come up for the Ducks now 2 years in a row, and we've dealt with it as people podcast about the Ducks, and it's this idea that there's this just set in stone hierarchy of players, and any deviation from that, you're just crazy. Like when I was tweeting about prospects leading up to the draft, every time that I would say, oh, X player looks good, people would say, oh, what are you talking about? The Ducks should just draft Ivan Demidov at 2 and or whatever 3, and you're just because you're a Habs fan, you're trying to manipulate the narrative so that he goes to 5, which wasn't intending on doing it, but I guess I succeeded anyway.
It worked out for you.
But yeah, so the notion of the consensus is just really annoying. Like, yeah, obviously, like you said in maybe the very beginning, it's like you're not drafting Tarin Smith at 3. But when there's a grouping of players, I think it's okay to not take exactly the guy who came up on XYZ list on the internet. So anyway.
Yeah. All right, Mitch. It's time for a hard-hitting thing.
Yeah, let's switch. Let's switch over.
One year ago, or a little over a year ago, you came on this podcast, and we asked you for a food hot take.
Oh, okay.
You had said oatmeal
You've had a year
was
to
bad.
prepare.
Do you have any new hot takes for us for food hot takes? You had said you appreciated the chaos of this episode, so I'm bringing it right now.
I mean, how nerdy can I be about this?
However you want. We now have someone in our YouTube chat that's Mitch Brown's bowl of oatmeal, by the way.
Is their username.
They are truly beautiful. They are. Okay, if we want to continue on to the thing of breakfast, honeydew shouldn't exist. It just should.
Wait, what is honeydew?
The fruit.
Like, wait, hold on. Am I? How backwards am I? What is honeydew?
It's a melon.
Yeah.
Oh, honeydew. Okay, melon. Yeah, it's not good. Is that the take here? It's not good?
Yeah, this is the take. So someone who's worked in a breakfast restaurant, I'm just going to tell you this. We get a lot of honeydews in, and there are people who love honeydew. They want bowls of honeydew. But we put extra honeydew in things because we don't want to give you strawberries.
It's not that good.
Honeydew feels just like filler.
It's too sweet.
It's just there.
It's too sweet. I don't know how to describe it.
I have so many takes on this. Okay, sourdough people. I love sourdough. I even had my own sourdough starter for a while. But you guys are annoying. Your bread is too sour. Stop that. The meal preppers. These people.
Oh no!
Yes.
Oh no!
Get him.
Don't come after me.
These people will be like, yeah. So I'm gonna make burritos for 3 months, and I'm gonna freeze burritos for 3 months, and then their burritos, they come out and they reheat the burritos in the microwave like an insane person. And when they take them out, the liquid is just seeping out of the tinfoil that they microwave them in. And people will post this on Instagram willingly.
Yeah, but they're high protein.
Yeah,
they're high protein burritos.
Okay,
like,
I don't meal prep
how
for
delicious this is as it like falls apart onto the plate below. No, it's terrible.
No. I only meal prep 8 meals for a week. I don't do the 3 months thing.
Wait,
4 for me and 4 for my wife.
Oh, so just 4.
Yeah.
So one.
I need to know: is this a chicken breast and brown rice prep?
No.
Maybe you do. Okay, good.
No.
My impression was wrong. I was anticipating that you were just straight up boiling chicken breast, like not sous vide it, but just like placing it in a pot of boiling water.
No, like this week I did like a Korean beef, just like marinade on some ground beef and some rice. But we'll mix it up every week and do something different.
Okay, yeah. So you're still crazy, but you're well adjusted, and you don't let people know unless in a podcast context that you're a meal prepper.
For sure. Yeah,
Jake has good self-awareness with some of his bad food takes. Like,
I have completely know my bad.
Doesn't
food
like
take.
eggs.
Yep.
Doesn't like avocado.
Yep.
But you at least acknowledge that you're on a desert island.
I wish I liked
thousands
them. They
of miles
really
from
good
civilization.
nutritionally.
Like that.
Avocado's overrated. I'll say it.
Okay.
As
I'll
someone
accept you
who
on my
likes it,
island.
as someone who likes it and is allergic to it, people will spend like $12 on like a piece of bread with avocado on it, and it's like
that's absurd.
Why?
That's absurd. Yeah,
I
agree with that.
It has flaky salt on it. Yeah, you know how much a thing of Maldon costs at the grocery store? Just go do it yourself. This is insane.
Trendy. Yeah, the avocado toast.
Speaking of trends,
lay it on
I have finally landed on something that is actually good. My first one, honeydew shouldn't exist, is really weak, if I'm being honest. Eggs on burgers. No.
That's a good take.
No.
That's a strong take.
As someone who doesn't like eggs, I love that.
Okay. I hate when people do this. It's like, so you go to a gastropub, because the only restaurants where I live in Canmore, so the Bow Valley Banff National Park is where I live basically, and every restaurant here is a gastropub, and every restaurant is like, how can we make a burger but worse? And they do one of two things. They put an egg on it. Okay, the egg, it's too wet. It makes the bread breaks down super fast. Like even if you toast the bread, and it overwhelms the other stuff, because you go to eat a pickle or whatever, and now it's covered in egg yolk, and you got to kind of like work through just to get the acidity from the pickle. It's not great. The other thing that they do is they make these super thick patties, and they make these super thick ones, and they're like, yes, we're gonna cook it medium rare. None of these people are gonna cook it medium rare. Let's be honest here. None of these people are gonna cook their burgers medium rare. And if they do get it medium rare, it's like the 3/4 of the burger is like shoe leather, and then there's just a little tiny pink strip in the middle of it. It's boring, it's hard to eat, it's lame, and they usually put like the worst toppings on it, or they just make it so big that you can't actually eat it. So it's like purely Instagram food. You're not eating at this point. You're just showing people that you have the money to go to a gastropub and the courage to take a photo at dinner when everyone else is judging you for being addicted Instagram so much that you have to take a picture of a boring ass burger and post it online.
I love this take. The thick burger is not great.
There's
patties
definitely
are better.
There's a Goldilocks zone for burger patty thickness, and
In-N-Out is perfect.
Less thick is better, in my opinion.
I agree.
Thick.
We are a very pro In-N-Out podcast.
Have you had In-N-Out, Mitch? I feel like we've probably asked you this. Have you been to California?
I'm too scared of gun violence to go to California.
Oh, okay. Well,
I as you know, I would be a walking target.
Yeah, you're definitely.
I am indistinguishable from the background, which makes me perfect.
Yeah. Well, if you ever come out here, I would be very curious for your take on In-N-Out because
I definitely want to go.
Doesn't have any egg in it. A thinner patty.
Very simple menu.
I just hate how the egg like pops when you bite into it, like with the egg on burger situation. Like it's just disgusting. It's just I don't want that in my life. And yeah, like it's weird because steak and eggs to me is generally good, but ground beef patty plus egg doesn't work the same. It just doesn't. Another thing I wanted to ask you, and then we'll let you go because we're getting incredibly high on time. But Olympics. Give me your sports. What are your events? What's the standout for you? It can be like it can be. Have you not watched the Olympics?
What country I'm from, right? I'm Canadian. Hey. I don't know the Summer Olympics. I don't know that they. I've never heard of the Summer Olympics.
Canada's doing well. There's a good swimmer.
Canada's doing well.
What have they won? What have they won?
Well, look, we're not talking about medals here. We're just talking about.
I'm spacing on her name, but didn't she win a gold in the 400 IM?
Yeah.
McIntosh.
Crap. Yes. So there you go. There's a gold medalist for Canada.
I'm a huge swimming fan. Love swimming. Swimming is my sport.
Welcome.
Only 400.
You're on a great podcast if it's all Californians then.
What about
just talking about swimming?
No field hockey? No?
So I once played hockey with a dude who played field hockey at a pretty decent level. And it was in Finland. We were just like doing this outdoor thing for a tournament, and the winner got like a free shot of some expensive liquor or whatever. and people were terrified. They were quaking when they saw me because they're like, Mitch is Canadian. He's going to kill us all. It's going to be horrifying. And then they had no idea that the Swiss Italian guy who plays field hockey was the real secret weapon and just would destroy everyone. It's a cool sport. They do some crazy things.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it in a long time, but yeah, maybe
it's the short sticks. It feels wrong to me. Like it feels like something's missing. Like the way that they have to like swipe at the ball just to make a basic pass.
I saw that they're not allowed to use their backhand or something like that, and that to me is weird.
No, they can. I think to take a shot. Anyway, whatever. I'm not an expert.
I don't know.
But you should watch the Olympics. They're fun. Canada's a good basketball team. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
I'm a big basketball guy. I don't like international basketball though.
They just beat Australia today.
Actually, I'm just making it up. I have no opinion on international basketball. You guys just have me so focused on I need to have opinions. Therefore, everything just is extreme.
Just you trying to take a stance on absolutely.
It's why I don't want to go to California, even though I want to go to California really bad. I'm hoping to go to California
love it here
relatively soon. But I needed to take a stance because this is what this is all about.
Correct.
I needed to have an opinion. No one cares about if it's right or wrong, if it's actual or not, if I even believe it. I just need to have an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I've ever had any really drastic takes on here that I didn't actually believe in. I've never done that.
Yeah, you've definitely never gone at me for some takes before.
Surfing is also one that Jake has taken a liking to.
So good.
The problem with surfing is that surfing is cool, but you're really dependent on there being waves. And if half the broadcast is just the two guys just, paddling around next to each other, just chopping it up, waiting for the waves, that doesn't make for the best TV.
Great background sport. We have a question, by the way, for you, Mitch. Our good friend 91 Pluting saying, can we get Mitch to admit live on air that he's a closeted Ducks fan?
I'm not a closeted Ducks fan. I am a Ducks fan. What the hell?
Did you have an NHL team growing up?
I would say definitely interested in the Leafs, definitely interested in the Habs. Those are probably the two teams I was most interested in. Fandom, very hard to come by. I'm a weird person. Fandom scares me. To be emotionally attached to something is to be endlessly disappointed.
It's
why would I want to have, you have
especially
such
Toronto
highs
Yeah.
And such extreme long lows.
I would say you're not weird. You're smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Fandom kind of sucks. Fandom's not that fun.
I like the sport. The sport is definitely more interesting to me. I would say probably the closest thing that I was probably a Montreal Canadiens fan. Like, I liked the beauty of the team, like in particular, like all the stars that they had, how fun it was to watch. But like when they didn't exist anymore and they moved on to other teams, when the framework of the team changed, it's like, yeah, I like that. I would just realize I was more interested in players and whatnot. And then I start becoming more interested in the Leafs and the Ducks. I love watching the Ducks play hockey this year. That was great. I really like the way that they draft. I've been a big fan of Madden's drafts for a very, very long time. It's great to see what he does, but it's also like, I really like how he just picks all of my favorite players. You know, I'm not gonna lie about that.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the fun thing about following the draft is that you kind of start rooting or just following different teams because they have a lot of guys that you like. Like the way that the Sharks are starting to look is like it's fun. Like some of the talent they've accumulated, and then Canadians, same thing. So anyway, all right, I think that'll do it for today. I think we should probably cut it here at over an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But Mitch, where can people find you? Where can they support you? Let them know.
You shouldn't find me. You should just leave me alone.
People ignore what he just said. You should go find him.
Yes, go find him.
Okay. Let me rephrase. Where can they support you?
I'm on Twitter at Mitch L. Brown. I tweet sometimes. I guess it's August soon, so I'm going to have to start tweeting things out again. I'll probably start with, I don't know, Frank Nazar video if you're interested in Frank. He's cool. Got an article on him. I think a Ben Danford article is coming out soon. EPRingside.com. That's where all my writing is. I also track data that you can find in the link in my Twitter profile for $2 a month. You can see all my player cards. I tracked about 70 teams so far this year across North America. And lots of Ducks prospects. I mean, all the Ducks prospects post great tracking results because that's what Anaheim Ducks prospects do. Those are the three things I think.
Yeah, go check them out. We are actually subscribers to the tracking data, and we rely on it quite a bit throughout the year. And the work that you guys do and that you do, Mitch, is invaluable for us and really for all hockey fans, because I think hockey fans deserve smarter coverage, and you guys provide that. And I'm hoping that just keeps growing, keeps accelerating, and becomes more of the norm. And if you want to support our podcast, everyone knows how, but go check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/crashthepond. Go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, check out the website, find us on Twitter. And on that note, we will talk to you next time, whenever that is. Don't actually know when, but we'll talk to you then. Have a good one.
Bye.